Have you ever trusted someone so much only to realize too late that they were never who you thought? That's what happened to Harper Ellison. On a brisk September evening in Chicago, the city felt alive and full of promise. The skyline shimmered above Lake Michigan, the trains rattled by with their familiar metallic song, and Harper, 32, was determined to outgrow her past heartbreak and start fresh. Her modest but carefully decorated apartment in Lincoln Park reflected her personality. Colorful prints on the walls, stacks of marketing books on the coffee table, a small window herb garden fighting for sunlight. She had a steady job at a boutique marketing firm downtown, a handful of loyal friends, and the kind of resilient optimism that only comes from having rebuilt yourself after life's curveballs. On that particular Friday, Harper found herself at a rooftop gathering thrown by her friend, Simone. The view was breathtaking. Twinkling city lights, a gentle breeze, laughter echoing above the traffic below. Harper wore her favorite leather jacket and tried to ignore the nervous flutter in her stomach. She hadn't been to many social events since her breakup nearly a year ago, but Simone insisted she needed to get back out there. As the night wore on, Harper relaxed, sipping on a craft cocktail, chatting with old friends, and silently vowing not to let her guard down too easily. That's when she noticed him, Camden Price. He was standing near the edge of the rooftop, engaged in animated conversation, his laugh bright and infectious. He looked out of place among the tech bros and finance guys, dressed in a tailored navy blazer and vintage sneakers, exuding both confidence and an easy, approachable charm. Harper's curiosity was piqued. When Simone introduced them, the chemistry was immediate. Witty banter, shared stories about their favorite Chicago neighborhoods, jokes about the city's unpredictable weather, and the best deep dish pizza. Harper was struck by how at ease she felt with him, how he seemed to listen intently, as if she were the only person in the room. Camden talked about his work as an entrepreneur, painting a picture of a fast-paced but rewarding life. He spoke about his latest business venture, a trendy app he was developing, and the exciting prospects it held. He described a future filled with travel, creative freedom, and the thrill of building something from the ground up. Harper found herself swept up in his enthusiasm, drawn to his vision and his magnetic presence. By the end of the night, as they bundled into an Uber with Simone and her boyfriend, Camden casually asked for Harper's number, promising to take her to his favorite jazz club the following week. Over the next few weeks, their connection deepened. Harper was surprised at how quickly Camden became a central part of her life. He texted her good morning, sent her playlists for her commute, and showed up with coffee at her office, just because. Their dates were the kind you see in movies: dinners at new restaurants in the West Loop, spontaneous road trips to Lake Geneva, late-night walks along the river. Camden had a knack for grand gestures. Surprise tickets to a sold-out concert, a handwritten note tucked into Harper's bag, an impromptu picnic in Millennium Park under a canopy of fairy lights. Harper's friends noticed the change in her. She was happier, more animated, her old spark returning. Even her family, cautious after her last relationship, was charmed when they finally met Camden at a Sunday brunch. He brought Harper's mother a bouquet of sunflowers, remembered her father's favorite baseball team, and offered to help Harper's younger brother with his resume. He seemed thoughtful, generous, and genuinely invested in Harper's happiness. For the first time in a long time, Harper allowed herself to imagine a future with someone, shared holidays, traveling together, maybe even buying a place of their own someday. Yet, beneath the romance and whirlwind excitement, there were subtle hints that not everything was as flawless as it seemed. The first time happened at a trendy bistro in River North. Camden reached for his wallet at the end of the meal, then patted his pockets and laughed. "I can't believe I forgot it. Again. Could you grab this one? I'll Venmo you as soon as we get home." It was a small thing, and Harper brushed it off. Everyone forgets their wallet sometimes, right? But then it happened again. At a coffee shop, at a movie theater, even at the grocery store. Each time, Camden's apologies were heartfelt and convincing, always accompanied by a new story about business expenses or a client payment delayed. He'd sweep her up in another spontaneous adventure soon after, and Harper found herself wanting to believe in his good intentions. Camden talked often about his work, but Harper began to notice that the details were always changing. One week, he was closing a deal with a major investor. The next, he was launching a new feature on his app. The successes were always just out of reach, the big payouts always right around the corner. Harper told herself it was just the nature of startups: risk, hustle, and a little bit of chaos. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that things weren't adding up. But Camden's charm was hard to resist. He'd show up with takeout on nights Harper worked late, listen to her vent about office politics, and reassure her that they were building a life together, even if the present was a little messy. When he suggested they spend a weekend in New York, Harper hesitated, worried about the cost, but Camden insisted he'd take care of everything. The trip was magical: Broadway shows, walks through Central Park, late-night pizza in Brooklyn. When Harper checked out of the hotel, Camden claimed there was a problem with his card and asked her to cover the bill, promising to reimburse her as soon as his client payment cleared. Harper, caught up in the euphoria of the trip, agreed, her doubts momentarily forgotten. Back in Chicago, the seasons changed, and Harper and Camden's relationship deepened. They spent lazy Sunday mornings cooking breakfast together, hosted dinner parties for friends, and started dreaming about finding a bigger apartment. Camden often talked about investing in their future, encouraging Harper to think bigger, take risks, trust that everything would work out. He painted vivid pictures of vacations in Italy, a loft in the West Loop, maybe even starting a business together someday. It felt like the real thing: messy, passionate, hopeful. Harper's friends, though, began to notice the cracks. "Doesn't he ever pay for anything?" Simone asked one night, after Harper confided about yet another forgotten wallet incident. Harper bristled, defensive. "He's just in a rough patch. Startups are hard. He's working so much, and I know he'll make it up to me." She wanted to believe that loyalty meant something, that standing by someone during hard times was part of building a real partnership. When Camden suggested they move in together, Harper was both thrilled and nervous. She'd never lived with a partner before, and the idea felt monumental. Camden found a spacious apartment in a new building, with floor-to-ceiling windows and a rooftop gym. The rent was steep, but he assured her his business was about to take off, and soon they'd be able to afford it easily. He convinced Harper to co-sign the lease, explaining that his credit was still recovering from some early business setbacks. Harper hesitated, but Camden was persuasive. He painted a picture of their future together, and she wanted to believe in it. She agreed, feeling equal parts exhilaration and anxiety. Moving day arrived on a chilly morning. The city was buzzing with energy, cabs honking, people hustling to work, the smell of roasted coffee drifting through the air. Harper and Camden unpacked boxes, set up their new space, and toasted with cheap champagne on the floor of their empty living room. For a moment, everything felt perfect. A new chapter, a new adventure, a chance to build something lasting. But as Harper drifted to sleep that night in their new apartment, listening to the distant sounds of the city, a flicker of doubt lingered. She pushed it aside, telling herself that trust was the foundation of any relationship. Camden was by her side, promising her the world. She chose to believe him, unaware of just how much that choice would cost her. The first weeks in the new apartment shimmered with possibility. Harper decorated the sunlit living room with mid-century furniture and plants, filling shelves with books and framed photographs from happier times. Camden praised her taste, bragging to his friends about their urban oasis during impromptu gatherings where laughter echoed off the high ceilings. He seemed energized by their fresh start, plotting out ambitious plans for the future as they cooked late-night dinners and watched the city lights flicker beyond their windows. But beneath the surface, tiny cracks began to form. It started with small things: a bill for the internet service that Camden said he'd paid, but which Harper found unopened on the counter days later. When she asked, he brushed it off with a sheepish grin, claiming he got distracted by a huge opportunity he couldn't pass up. "Don't worry, babe," he'd say, pulling her in for a kiss. "I've got it handled. Big things are coming for us." Harper wanted to believe him. She remembered the Camden who brought her coffee on stressful mornings, who left notes in her lunch bag, and who made her feel adored in ways she hadn't experienced before. So she let the little things slide. When Camden's business ventures came up in conversation, he spun tales of soon-to-be-signed contracts and lucrative partnerships, painting vivid pictures of a near future where money would never be a concern. He started talking about moving to a bigger apartment someday, maybe even buying a place of their own if the next deal goes through. His optimism was infectious, and Harper found herself sharing in the excitement, at least at first. As autumn deepened and the air turned crisp, Harper's workload ramped up. She spent long hours in the office, chasing deadlines and managing clients, always returning home to the soft glow of their apartment. She'd find Camden lounging on the couch, laptop open, phone pressed to his ear as he navigated another critical call. But increasingly, he seemed distracted, his attention split between her and whatever business drama he claimed to be managing. One evening, over takeout containers and half-finished wine, Camden suggested they upgrade their apartment. "We're doing great, Harper. Why not get a place with more space? An office for you, a balcony for me to work on deals? We deserve it." Harper hesitated, glancing at the unpaid bills stacked on the entryway table. Camden noticed her doubt and took her hand, his voice softening. "Trust me. This is just the start. I just need a little help getting us there." He convinced her to co-sign a new lease, something bigger and more expensive, a sign of their growing commitment. The real estate agent smiled as they signed the papers, congratulating them on the next step. Harper ignored the knot in her stomach, telling herself that love meant partnership, and partnership meant taking risks together. The move brought fresh energy, but also new expenses. Camden insisted on redecorating, nothing extravagant, but enough to max out Harper's credit card with furniture, curtains, and a new television. When she brought up budgeting, Camden waved her concerns away. "This is just for now. Once the deal closes, I'll pay it all off. You're investing in our future." As the weeks passed, his promises grew more elaborate, but the results never materialized. He talked about a startup on the verge of exploding, a silent partner about to invest, a tech conference where he'd land the next big client. Yet, every payday came and went with Camden asking Harper to cover groceries, utilities, or even his half of the rent. He always had an excuse: a client's check delayed, a wire transfer lost in the system, a business partner suddenly out of town. Harper's friends noticed the changes before she did. At brunch one Saturday, her best friend Sienna leaned in, brow furrowed. "You seem stressed, Harp. Is everything okay with you and Camden?" Harper laughed it off, blaming work and the move. But Sienna pressed, mentioning that Camden always seemed to be between things, or waiting for something big. Harper bristled, feeling defensive. "He's just trying to build something for us. I believe in him. Isn't that what relationships are about?" Still, the doubts gnawed at her. One night, after Camden claimed he'd landed a massive deal, Harper tried to celebrate, but he was distant, scrolling endlessly through his phone, muttering about a missed call. When she pressed him for details, he snapped, accusing her of not supporting his dreams. The argument ended with Camden storming out, slamming the door. Harper sat in the silence, staring at the city lights, wondering when things had shifted and why she felt so alone in a relationship meant to be a partnership. The financial pressure grew. Harper found herself juggling bills, transferring balances between cards, and dipping into her savings to cover rent. Camden reassured her again and again, apologizing for the stress and promising that relief was just around the corner. He suggested they open a joint credit card for emergencies. And after another late-night conversation filled with tears and reassurances, Harper agreed. She wanted to believe him, to believe in the life they'd imagined together. Winter descended on Chicago, blanketing the city in snow and casting long shadows over their apartment. Harper's days stretched into nights, her job demanding more as her personal life grew heavier. She lost sleep worrying about money, checking her accounts obsessively and dreading the next bill. Camden's absences became more frequent. Nights out, networking, weekends spent at conferences, always with vague explanations and grand promises. Her family began to notice. At Thanksgiving dinner, her older brother Marcus pulled her aside. "I know you care about him, Harp, but are you sure he's being honest with you?" Harper snapped back, tired and embarrassed. "You don't know him like I do. He's doing his best. I just need to support him a little longer." But inside, Harper was unraveling. The city, once a canvas for her dreams, now felt oppressive, its cold wind a constant reminder of how exposed she felt. She started hiding credit card statements, afraid Camden would see how much debt they'd accumulated. She skipped meals out with friends, citing work, because she couldn't afford to split the check. The apartment, once filled with laughter and hope, grew quiet, each room echoing with unspoken tensions and unmet promises. One Friday night, after another argument about overdue bills, Camden pulled Harper close, his eyes glistening with sincerity. "I know I've let you down, but next week it's all going to change. I have a meeting with an investor. This is the one. We'll be set, I promise." Harper nodded, clinging to hope, desperate for something to believe in. She told herself that everyone faces tough times, that love meant weathering the storm together. As the days passed, Harper waited anxiously for news, checking her phone obsessively for updates from Camden. Each day bled into the next, her anxiety mounting as the bills piled higher and Camden's promises grew fainter. She barely slept, her mind racing with worries about money, her job, and the future she'd once been so sure of. If you've ever found yourself questioning whether to trust your instincts or your heart, you know how Harper feels. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you can follow her journey as she faces the consequences of her choices, and see if she'll find the strength to break free from this cycle. Harper's story is far from over, and the next chapter will test her in ways she never imagined. At work, her performance began to slip. She missed deadlines, forgot meetings, and struggled to concentrate. Her boss called her in for a meeting, expressing concern but offering support. "You're one of our brightest, Harper. If something's going on, let's talk about it." Harper nodded, promising to improve, but inside she felt like she was drowning. Camden, meanwhile, became harder to reach. He stopped answering texts right away, showing up late to dinner or missing it entirely. When he was home, he was preoccupied, pacing the apartment, making phone calls in hushed tones, and typing furiously on his laptop. Harper felt like an intruder in her own home, tiptoeing around his moods and hoping for scraps of affection. The city outside marched on, oblivious to her turmoil. Snow piled on the sidewalks, cab drivers cursed at icy intersections, and the holiday lights flickered in shop windows. Harper watched couples laughing over coffee and friends shopping for gifts, feeling more isolated than ever. She longed for the easy intimacy she and Camden once shared, the feeling that they were a team. One evening, as she sorted through a stack of mail, her heart sank. Another notice of overdue payment, this time for the joint credit card. She confronted Camden, her voice trembling. "We can't keep going like this, Cam. We're drowning. I need to know what's really happening." Camden hugged her, promising, again, that everything would be fine, that he just needed her to believe in him a little longer. Harper clung to his words, afraid to admit how lost she felt. She told herself that all couples face hard times, that things would get better. But deep down, the fear was growing. The fear that she was alone in her struggle, that Camden's promises were just smoke and mirrors. And still, she waited. For the deal to close, for the investor to call, for the life Camden had promised to finally begin. Each day she grew more tired, more anxious, more uncertain. The city's winter chills seeped into her bones, and the apartment that once felt like home became a place she dreaded returning to. Harper wondered how much longer she could keep holding on, hoping that love would be enough to see them through the storm. The days blurred together, each one colder and heavier than the last. Harper's sleep was restless, interrupted by the persistent ping of overdue payment reminders and the gnawing anxiety that never seemed to leave her. She clung to the hope that Camden's deal would finally come through, that all the sacrifices she had made would mean something in the end. But as the weeks passed, that hope began to slip through her fingers like melting snow on the city sidewalks outside her window. One evening, Harper arrived home late from work. The sun had set hours before, leaving the streets bathed in the yellow glow of streetlights and the soft white haze of swirling snow. The apartment was eerily quiet. Usually, Camden would have music playing or the faint sound of his voice echoing from his home office as he hustled his next big break. Tonight, there was only silence. She hung her coat by the door, her breath catching in her throat as she glanced at the kitchen counter. A pile of unopened mail waited for her. More bills, more final notices. She tried to steady herself, repeating Camden's words in her mind. Just trust me a little longer. But the silence felt different tonight. Heavy. Final. Harper called out his name, her voice trembling. No answer. She moved through the apartment, the hardwood floors cold beneath her feet. His keys weren't in the bowl by the door. His coat was gone. In the bedroom, the closet doors hung open, and his side was empty. No shirts, no shoes, not even the cologne bottle he always left out. She checked the bathroom. The razor he kept on the shelf was missing too. A wave of panic crashed over her. She fumbled for her phone and dialed Camden. The call went straight to voicemail. She tried again. Still nothing. Texts bounced back undelivered. She scrolled through her messages, desperate for an explanation, for anything that would make sense of the emptiness around her. That's when she saw it. A single envelope propped against the coffee maker, her name scrawled in his hurried handwriting. Harper's hands shook as she opened it. Inside, a short note. I'm sorry. I never wanted it to end like this. I promise I'll make it right. Please take care of yourself. I just need some time. That was all. No explanation, no details, just a vague apology and another empty promise. For a long moment, Harper just stood there, the letter fluttering in her hands. The city outside seemed to press in through the windows, all noise and movement and life, while her world had gone utterly still. It didn't take long for reality to set in. The apartment, so carefully chosen for their new life together, now felt cavernous and cold. The bills that had once been a shared responsibility were now hers alone. As she sifted through the mail, dread pooled in her stomach. Credit card statements she didn't recognize, accounts that had been opened in her name, balances far higher than she remembered. She spent the next hours combing through statements, staring in disbelief at charges she never made. Electronics, meals out, hotel stays. She called the banks, her voice barely steady as she tried to explain. The words felt foreign in her mouth. He's gone. I don't know where he is. I didn't authorize these charges. Each call ended the same way. They would investigate, but for now the responsibility was hers. The days that followed were a haze of phone calls, paperwork, and mounting fear. Harper barely ate. Sleep came in fitful bursts, haunted by memories of Camden and the life they'd built, or the life she thought they'd built. Her friends rallied around her, coming over with groceries, helping her sift through the mess. But the shame was overwhelming. She replayed every moment in her mind, searching for the signs she should have seen, the questions she should have asked. There were moments when anger flickered through the fog, anger at Camden for betraying her trust, anger at herself for believing in him. But mostly, she just felt emptied out. The city that had once felt so full of promise now seemed indifferent, its streets crowded with strangers who moved too quickly to notice her pain. Harper's job became her anchor. She poured herself into her work, grateful for the distraction. But even there, the stress followed her. She worried about the credit checks HR might run, about whether her mounting debt would cost her the stability she so desperately needed. At night, she combed through forums and articles about recovering from financial fraud, learning the language of credit reports and debt consolidation. Some days were better than others. On the worst days, she wanted nothing more than to hide under the covers and forget the world outside existed, On the best days, she took small steps, calling another creditor, making another payment, refusing to let shame keep her isolated. With the support of her friends, Harper slowly began to reclaim pieces of herself. She met with a lawyer who explained her rights and helped her file fraud reports. She set up appointments with a financial counselor, learning how to budget with what little she had left. Each meeting was a reminder of the mess Camden had left behind, but also of her own resilience. Winter dragged on, but Harper noticed the changes in herself. She was less afraid of the phone ringing. She answered the door when her friends stopped by, no longer afraid of their pity. She started running again, winding through the city's icy parks, letting the rhythm of her breath and the pounding of her feet remind her she was still here, still moving forward. One afternoon, as sunlight finally broke through the gray clouds, Harper sat in a cafe with her best friend Riley. Steam curled from her coffee cup as she recounted what she'd learned in the weeks since Camden had disappeared. "I keep thinking about all the times I ignored my gut," Harper admitted, her voice quiet but steady. "I wanted to believe in him so badly. I wanted to believe we were building something real." Riley reached across the table, squeezing her hand. "It's not your fault. He took advantage of your kindness, but you're not alone in this. You never were." Harper managed a small smile. The pain was still there, but it was softer now, dulled by the knowledge that she was surviving, maybe even healing. In the weeks that followed, Harper's life began to take a new shape. The apartment felt less haunted, more her own. She hung new curtains, rearranged the furniture, threw herself into projects that made the space feel safe again. She started volunteering at a local nonprofit that helped women recovering from financial abuse, sharing her story and listening to others who had been through their own storms. At work, her focus and determination paid off. She landed a major client for her agency, earning the recognition she'd always craved. Her boss pulled her aside one evening, praising her resilience and leadership. "You've been through a lot, Harper, but you never let it stop you," he said. "That's not just impressive, it's inspiring." The words stayed with her. For the first time in months, Harper allowed herself to feel proud, not just for surviving, but for growing. The fear that had once paralyzed her was slowly giving way to something stronger: confidence. As spring approached, the city thawed. Trees budded along the streets, and people lingered on cafe patios, faces turned toward the sun. Harper found herself smiling more, laughing with friends, dreaming about the future. Not the future Camden had promised, but one she was building for herself, day by day. Late one evening, Harper sat on her apartment balcony, the city lights sparkling below. She opened her laptop and began to write, not a letter to Camden, but a letter to herself. She wrote about the pain, the betrayal, the fear, but she also wrote about the strength she'd discovered, the friendships that had carried her, the lessons she'd learned. She ended the letter with a promise. "I will never ignore my instincts again. I will never let someone else define my worth. I am enough, just as I am." The weight in her chest lifted, just a little. Looking out over the city, Harper felt a sense of peace. She knew there were still challenges ahead, debts to pay, questions without answers. But she also knew she could face whatever came next. If you've ever found yourself questioning your own judgment, doubting your strength, or picking up the pieces after someone let you down, Harper's story is proof. You are not alone. Share your thoughts below, subscribe for more true stories like this, and don't forget to turn on notifications. Your voice, your story, your resilience, they matter. And tomorrow is always a new beginning.